All right, motherfucks. It's your boy, the hater, once again up in this bitch, right? And today we're going to talk about something that I think, personally, could really help WWE in the future. You see, guys, WWE has made a series of bad investments, motherfuckers. Bad investments on shitty wrestlers, right? You see this all the time. They invested wrestlers that we all know intuitively will never ever make it, right? Perfect example of this would be Hideo Itami, motherfucks. Hideo Itami, right? Kevin Owens, another one, right? People that you just look at and you're like, this guy is not going to be a main event star. Now, I understand not everyone is meant to be a main event star, but I would assume that the money that someone is paid is commensurate to what WWE expects from him or her. So, for example, right, when they signed Kevin Owens, they probably expected him to be a main eventer, and it failed. So that is what I consider a bad investment, right? For example, Hornswoggle is a great investment, right? Because you sign Hornswoggle, you probably are paying him less than Kevin Owens, but you're probably still paying him a good amount. But you got your money's worth from Hornswoggle because Hornswoggle did exactly what you should expect Hornswoggle to do. You know what I mean? He went out there, he did his best to be a little bastard and a leprechaun, and he had some wrestling matches here and there, right? But he was entertaining for what he was, you know? El Torito, same thing. You're like, dress up as a bull and jump around the ropes. He did exactly that. What the fuck more do you want from him, right? From Kevin Owens, from Nakamura, from Itami, you want a bit more. You want them to be successful and get over, right? And they didn't. Hornswoggle was more over than these motherfucks, if you ask your boy, right? People like Hornswoggle. You know what I'm saying? So, now, with that being said, we're going to talk about the top 10 wrestlers that WWE should sign this upcoming year, this upcoming season, right, starting the day after WrestleMania, if you're asking me, that I believe will improve their product, their shows dramatically, right? They will all be an improvement. You know what I mean? Now, I said it's a list of 10 people, but it's going to be more than 10 people because some of these things are like, let's say, tag teams or factions or things like that, right? So, motherfucks, without any further ado up in this piece, let's talk about the top 10 wrestlers or wrestling entities that would benefit WWE if they were signed. Coming in at number 10, this is going to be a doozy for a lot of you. Many people don't know this guy. But there's a wrestler called Katsuya Kitamura, motherfucks. Katsuya Kitamura, right? He's a New Japan guy who hasn't been wrestling for a couple of years. Maybe they fired him. I don't know. He trained at the New Japan Wrestling Dojo. Then he became a jobber. Like everyone in New Japan has to first become a jobber before they're repackaged and brought in as a serious wrestler. It's ridiculous. It's retarded. I understand most of them should have to go through this because most of them are jobbers, right? But some of them, like Kitamura, should have been pushed to the main event. Here's why, motherfucks. First of all, you can go Google this guy, Katsuya Kitamura, and just look at him, right? He's like a Japanese Brock Lesnar. Now, he's not as tall as Brock Lesnar, but he is almost as jacked. He is a jacked dude. And one thing we've never gotten is a Japanese wrestler who looks like a real wrestler, right? And that, in my opinion, is a disgrace to all of Japan, right? It furthers the stereotype that Asian men are small and weak, which is obviously retarded because there's plenty of very, very strong Asian guys. But you would think that they all look like a bunch of Nakamuras and a bunch of Hideo Itamis or Taka Michinokus by looking. Because it's like they all get these flabby guys. I don't understand why. You know? At least with Mexican wrestlers, you know, for every like little, you know, Lince Dorado, you'll have like a relatively jacked Rey Mysterio or an Eddie Guerrero or a Del Rio, right? People that look like men. You know, every Japanese wrestler looks like a boy. You know what I'm saying? Like here's what I mean, right? Remember those samurai movies, motherfucks, where it's like a badass Japanese dude with like facial hair and like a man bun and a samurai sword, and he's out there chopping motherfucks left and right? What would that guy think of Hideo Itami with his rainbow hair? What would that guy think of Nakamura coming around and dancing like a little douchebag, right? What would that guy think of Asuka? He would probably think, wow, my culture has gone to shit. This is what it represents masculinity in my culture now, right? But that's not all that represents masculinity, motherfucks. Not everyone is like that, right? When I went to Japan, I went in there like an ignoramus, and this was only a few years ago, so I apologize for my ignorance. But I really thought that there would be a lot more otaku, nerd-type people. No, motherfucks. most of the people there are regular people, regular men and women, regular boys and girls. They're not awkward, right? They don't have weird hair. They're just people, man. You know, and for some reason, I found this to be shocking. I was like, oh, this is not how Japanese and culture and Japan is presented to me. You know, it's presented like a bunch of rainbow colors. And there was some of those too, don't get me wrong, like in the Harajuku district, right? But for the most part, they were just people. Random people, baseball hats, walking around normal, you know? And I could sense that these people probably also thought, holy shit, my entire culture is being misrepresented, right? As if it is a nerd culture, and it's not, motherfucks. You know, they have high fashion, they got badasses, they got everything that everyone else has, obviously, right? So Kitamura, I think, would be a welcome addition to the Japanese wrestling trope. Now, I don't know how good of a wrestler this guy is, but just having a jacked guy, right, who is not white or black or Hispanic, I think would be good, or Indian, because we have Jinder Mahal, motherfuckers, let's not forget, right? Would be good, right? You could just book him so well, right? You could just put him on NXT, right? He just destroys Kushida, right? And his entire thing is, I'm tired of the stereotype of Japanese men being a bunch of weirdos who dress like Back to the Future guy or Michael Jackson. No, we're not all weirdos. Some of us are serious motherfuckers who are here to kick ass and win titles, right? And that could be his whole thing. Now, obviously, if Kitamura spoke English and could articulate what I just said, that would be ideal, right? If he can't, bring out Funaki, I don't care, you know what I'm saying? Not Funaki, because Funaki kind of is part of the problem, you know, he's like a skinny guy with like weird hair. But you understand what I'm saying? Give him like an older Japanese man with a goatee, you know, like a serious man, basically, right? That we're here to be fucking serious. We're not here to put thumbs up each other's asses like they do in New Japan. We're not here to dance like morons. We're not here to be these goofs who dress like Hollywood characters or to have weird colored hair. I'm here to kick ass. I'm not here to fuck around. That would be ideal. I think that would really go over. People would love that guy. Like kind of like how Kenzo Suzuki started, except immediately they took Kenzo Suzuki, who was an otherwise like serious Japanese wrestler, and they made him into a goof like 3 weeks afterwards, you know? Same thing with fucking Tensai. Remember him? I mean, obviously aside from the problem that Tensai is a white guy, you know? And they're like, oh, he dominated in Japan. But he's like this weird guy who like, you know, acts Japanese, but it's fucking Albert, you know? That's not going to work. Now, before I continue on to number 9, I understand I'm taking a long time with number 10, but this is important. It doesn't have to be Kitamura, motherfucks. It could be any jacked Japanese wrestler. It just so happens that he's one of the only ones. But like a big, strong guy from Japan, right, who doesn't fuck around. That would help the WWE product tremendously. And I believe it would also help with the way that the Japanese are portrayed in wrestling. Number 9, Will Osprey. People love to hate this guy, right? I know, he's another Ricochet. But I believe he's better than Ricochet, number 1. And 2, he actually does power moves. You know, he does power moves, and he does that move like the beheading or whatever, where he just like swings his arm across the guy's head in like basically like a reverse clothesline, and it's badass. You know, Will Osprey could definitely add something to NXT and maybe eventually Monday Night Raw. Now, he's not gonna add a lot, but he can add something. He's one that should be signed. Number 8, motherfucks, Jurassic Express up in this bitch. Now, a lot of people are probably thinking, hater, what the fuck are you talking about? Jurassic Express? I'll explain myself. First of all, Lucha Soros, he was already signed with WWE, but he left because he was bullied by Bill DeMott, right? So, I don't even know if he deserves another chance, right? Because a lot of people were bullied and they didn't leave, but it is what it is. Lucha Soros is a big, strong, physically gifted guy who looks badass. You have to take the mask off of him, right? But his tattoos and his physique look badass, and he deserves a shot at WWE. Jungle Boy is another one that deserves a shot, right? He's someone that could one day become a decent mid-carder. I hate to say it, but it's true. Marco Stunt is a great novelty act. If you want to put over the big Japanese wrestler that I just mentioned, you have him fight Marco Stunt. He just destroys Marco Stunt. There is definitely room for people like Marco Stunt in WWE. Marco Stunt is one of the best guys in AEW because he actually has something to offer. You see what I'm saying, motherfucks? He has something to offer. Marco Stunt can be put, he's like a Spike Dudley. You can put him in there with like the Big Show, just to show that Big Show is just chokeslam this guy 19 times. Or when Brock Lesnar triple powerbombed Spike Dudley, right? Like that. You need a guy like that. You need a guy that is there to be manhandled. And who's better than that than Marco Stunt, who actually has a little bit of personality. So you win both ways, in my opinion, with these guys. Jurassic Express, I believe, will eventually be signed. I don't know if all of them, but some of them will definitely be one day signed by WWE. Number 7, motherfucks, all of Team Taz. All of these guys should be signed by WWE, including Hook. You know, Hook is more interesting than like 90% of the AEW roster, right? Because he's Taz's son. And eventually, as the story plays out, I'm sure it'll be like, oh, Dad, what are you doing? One of those bullshit storylines. But it is what it is. Team Taz as an entity works. Now, you would have to amend Team Taz a little bit, right? You would have to perhaps remove Taz, put him on commentary. He's one of the best commentators, in my opinion, of all time, right? He's fun. He's entertaining, motherfucks. Then you put like Powerhouse Hobbs, Ricky Starks, and Brian Cage together, and you prevent, under any circumstances, Brian Cage ever speaking into a microphone. This guy is one of the worst mic talkers of all time. He is probably the least charismatic wrestler I've ever seen in my life. Like, they entrust him to say one catchphrase, like, who better, right? And he fucking botches it. He says it with like zero believability, which is odd because he's a big, strong motherfucker, you know? And back in the day, in Lucha Underground, he actually had some charisma. He was actually talking, cutting promos, and being like, I'm not a man, I'm a machine. Stick to that. No more who better. No more trying to be cool and hip. No. You're not cool, you're not hip. You're big and strong. That's your draw. Don't try to be something you're not, right? That's one thing I see in wrestling. It's like you see a guy, he's like big and strong, he's like, I'm going to be good on the mic. Shut the fuck up, be big and strong. Learn from Batista and Brock Lesnar. You don't need to do any of that shit. Leave that to people like Triple H and Stone Cold and The Rock who can do it. You can't do it, kid. So anyways, Ricky Starks, great on the mic now. I'm really appreciating Ricky Starks. One of the best AEW signings of all time. I used to hate his ass because of this whole like pretty boy gimmick, which I think is unbelievable for him. But the facts are what the facts are. Kid's good. He looks great in terms of his physique, right? He's got good moves, and he can talk. So what more do you want from this guy? You know what I mean? Like, he's not fucking The Rock, but, you know, he's decent. He's good enough. Next up, we have number 6. That's right, cucks. Darby Allen, right? Now, again, you're probably thinking, hater, what the fuck are you talking about? Darby Allen is a skinny jobber. I'll tell you what I'm talking about, motherfucks. Darby Allen is interesting. The comparisons between him and Sting are ridiculous, but the comparisons between Darby Allen and Jeff Hardy are directly on point. Darby Allen has a very Jeff Hardy-esque manner of wrestling. What I mean by this is this. Every time Darby Allen climbs something, you know shit's about to go down. This guy is not afraid to take a bump. He's not afraid to be thrown around. You know? He wrestles in a way that is commensurate with his size. Like, this is important. In my last 2 videos when I talked about Lucha Libre, I explained that Rey Mysterio has to wrestle like Rey Mysterio does because everyone is bigger than him. Same thing with Darby Allen. Darby Allen is presented as a guy that wins because he has guts and is willing to take risks. You see what I'm saying? Darby Allen is not out there beating the shit out of people, right? And if he is, he's doing it by putting a trash can on his back and jumping onto the guy back first, right? Like, he's hurting himself. Like, he's giving himself, let's say, 80% damage to give the other guy 100% damage, you know? And that is interesting. Furthermore, Jeff Hardy, even though, you know, we think of Jeff Hardy as a high flyer and a cruiserweight, Jeff Hardy is a big guy, comparatively speaking. He's like 6'1" or some shit like that, right? He's not a short guy. He's not a cruiserweight almost. I feel like now he's like 220, 225. You know, definitely not 205, but not even by the old standards. Jeff Hardy is not a guy that can as easily be thrown around. Now, when he was thrown around by people like Brock Lesnar, he sold it really well and made it convincing. But not the same way that Darby Allen would sell it, because Darby Allen is about half of Jeff Hardy. So if you take Darby Allen and you throw him, right, he will sell it like he got killed, you know? And that also brings value. Darby Allen would bring value. Darby Allen has a gimmick that could translate relatively well to the main roster. Darby Allen is relatable for many people. Not for your boy, but for those skater people that listen to ska, maybe he's relatable, motherfucks. He's certainly more relatable than Cucky Omega, or the Young Cucks, or Cucky Rhodes, or QT Cuck. You know what I'm saying? All these jabros are not relatable at all. Like, I don't give a shit about QT Marshall. Darby Allen is interesting. And I understand now why AEW is pushing him. You can make an argument that MJF and Darby Allen are the only 2 guys that are being pushed in AEW that are not WWE guys or are not part of the elite. You see what I'm saying? So there you have it. Well deserved for Darby Allen. I'm starting to like the kid. I ain't gonna lie. Person number 5, Jim Ross. Okay? They already have Jerry the King Lawler. Get Jim Ross. Put Jim Ross and the King on commentary. If it costs you $15 million, you have to do this. Okay? I can no longer tolerate Tom Phillips or whatever his name is, or Corey Graves, these fucking nerds. I don't want to hear nerds talk. I want to hear like an analyst type like Jim Ross and a really cool guy like Jerry the King Lawler. A lot of people, a lot of anti-smarks don't like Jerry the King Lawler, but what I say to that is go fuck yourselves. He's the best. Jerry the King Lawler is by far the best on commentary in history. You know, a lot of people give JR credit for the Attitude Era, but if it weren't for Jerry the King Lawler, nobody would even be listening to JR. They'd just be watching the ring. It's Jerry the King Lawler, his inappropriate comments, his comedy, right? And more importantly, his interaction with JR, the serious, like professional commentator, and the goofy guy who dresses like a king, like a playing card, right? It was awesome. You can capture that again. But in order to do that, you have to allow Jerry the King Lawler to be himself. And then JR will become himself as a result. JR cannot be paired up with Excalibur, who is essentially Corey Graves. Nobody wants to hear that shit. Maybe smarts want to hear, oh my god, that's like Kita Gatame, right? Think about that. Let's compare Excalibur to Taz, for example, right? Taz knows all the holds, but he's entertaining. He's not just there saying, oh, you got a headlock. No, Taz says crazy shit, goofy shit. He's fun, you know? So that's what I got to say about that. JR needs to come back in order to form the greatest announcing duo, to reform the greatest announcing duo of all time. Person number 4, Chris Jericho, motherfucks. Chris Jericho needs to come home. Jericho can still go. A lot of people are saying Jericho's fat, all these other things. Jericho can still go. Jericho still has star appeal. Jericho is still fun. I want to see Jericho in WWE again. I believe that Jericho made someone like Kevin Owens seem more interesting than he actually is. Look at Kevin Owens before Jericho, during Jericho, and after Jericho, and you tell me when he was the most entertaining. Matter of fact, look at anyone in relation to Jericho like that, and you tell me Jericho cannot make stars. Jericho is one of those guys that will almost certainly come back to WWE at some point. It might be in a few years, in a Kurt Angle-like capacity, right, where he's like you know, a Hall of Fame-like capacity. He might show up once or twice, but Jericho is a guy that is always interesting, and I love Jericho. One of my favorites of all time. Person number 3, Magnus, motherfucks. Magnus, and perhaps also Bram, but we're going to stick with Magnus. Magnus is one of those guys that has almost everything you need for someone to have. He looks like a man. He acts like a man. He wrestles pretty well, and he's pretty good on the mic. I don't know why Magnus has yet to be signed. Magnus is actually someone that could be a main eventer. Magnus versus Drew McIntyre or Lashley would be believable because Magnus is a big, strong guy. Now, of course, we all know in real life, Lashley would tear this guy apart because Lashley's like twice as big. But nonetheless, it is believable, right? Magnus is someone that needs to come immediately, not go to NXT, become Intercontinental Champion his first like 2 weeks, and then get pushed to the main event. Magnus deserves it. Magnus, it is astounding how Magnus has not been signed by WWE yet. You know, and they sign people like LA Knight, who then they have job to Bronson Reed. You know what I'm saying? There you have it. That's what I gotta say about Magnus. Person, motherfucks, not reasons. We're doing 10 people. Person or entity number 2, Awesome Kong. All right, Awesome Kong, arguably the greatest female wrestler of all time. Now, because Awesome Kong is big and strong, she can wrestle for far longer than, let's say, someone like Gail Kim, right? Even though Gail Kim, I'm sure, can still go, Gail Kim relies on, like, you know, doing like Lucha Libre type shit. So you take someone like Awesome Kong, you bring her in, you book her like this, motherfucks. You book her like this. You have her go in, destroy a few jobbers first. Then you have her go and powerbomb the shit out of Raquel Gonzalez. and Rhea Ripley and Charlotte and Shayna Baszler. And if she can, you have her like body slam Nia Jax and Tamina, right? You have her destroy the other bigger women and then become champion easily. You let her be champion for a minimum of 1 to 2 years, and then you have someone take the title from her, and that person becomes a star instantaneously. Or you have Becky Lynch come back and take the title from her. Or better yet, you have Becky Lynch come back, you have the match, you know what I'm saying? Awesome Kong just hits the powerbomb. That's the end of that. Awesome Kong got pregnant and unfortunately had a miscarriage, and this ruined her first stint in WWE. But it would have been quite the stint. Awesome Kong is fucking awesome, as the name would suggest. That's how I would book her. That's how I would book all these motherfuckers that I'm talking about. But specifically, Awesome Kong's booking would have to go this way, I believe, for it to be awesome. And now, motherfuckers, the moment we've all been waiting for. Who's at number 1? Well, I'll tell you, cucks. Coming in at number 1 on this list is none other than Warhorse, motherfuckers. Warhorse. Just kidding. Fuck Warhorse. This guy should never be signed. Maybe he should. I don't know. Maybe he is good. Fuck knows. Right? Number 1 is obvious. Everyone should know who the number 1 missed opportunity by WWE is. He's a little bit older, but still fucking awesome. The answer, of course, is James Storm, motherfucks. The Tennessee Cowboy, James Storm. This one books itself. You don't even need to worry about this. What happens is this. At the pay-per-view at WrestleMania, you have Bobby Roode and Dolph Ziggler defend the titles against, let's say, the Street Profits or any other tag team who gives a rat's ass. The tag team wins. And the tag team of the Dirty Dogs, Bobby Roode and Dolph Ziggler, do not have the titles anymore. Right? They then, on Friday, on SmackDown, have a rematch. Bobby Roode costs them the titles, or Dolph Ziggler betrays Bobby Roode mid-match, hits the zigzag, the other people pin Bobby Roode, and then Dolph Ziggler starts beating the shit out of Bobby Roode. The argument being that, like, I'm better than you, you held me down. You know, the stereotypical Ziggler argument. You might even want Dolph Ziggler to be joined by someone else, right? So they 2-on-1 Bobby Roode. And then, as he's about to get his ass beat even more, the music hits, James Storm comes out, runs into the ring, hits the last call on both of these motherfucks, right? The other guy, Dolph Ziggler's partner, rolls out of the ring. Ziggler is like selling it and is all confused. Bobby Roode gets up, right? He grabs Ziggler, does the suplex on him. James Storm catches him. They hit the DWI. They hit the DWI up in this bitch. Boom, 1, 2, 3, DWI, right? They have a moment where they look at each other, right? Like in disbelief, like what the fuck is happening? Is this really James Storm? Then they give each other a nice hug, and then they turn around, face the hard camera, and they do the little beer money taunt, where, you know, they like stomp their feet really fast, and they go, beer, money, right? The whole crowd, if there was a crowd, the whole crowd would lose their shit. You might want to save this for a moment where you have the crowd. But this writes itself. There is no reason why James Storm should not be signed by WWE, and this is the correct way to book him. There is no reason for James Storm to have a singles run when all we want to see, I mean, I would love to see a James Storm singles run, don't get me wrong, one of my favorite wrestlers of the last few decades, but more importantly, we need to see beer money, right? There's no reason why the Dirty Dogs cannot be replaced by Beer Money Incorporated. Who the fuck wants Ziggler and Roode? No. We want Roode and James Storm. I really hope this happens. This will finally be something to look forward to in tag team wrestling in WWE. This is a real tag team, a really good tag team, and one that can get a fresh start in WWE where they've belonged all along, motherfuckers. Where they belong all along. Easily the best tag team in TNA history. I mean, unless you count like the Dudley Boys, obviously, which doesn't count. But like, easily the best tag team. Right up there with LAX and Motor City Machine Guns as the best TNA original tag teams. So that's what I gotta say about that, man. We need to see this. It needs to happen. So there you have it, cucks. Those have been 10 motherfucks that WWE should sign in order to improve. Motherfucks, all right? Do it, WWE. Stop dicking around. Stop wasting our time. Nobody wants to see Bobby Roode versus Dolph Ziggler. Hell, I mean, you could even fire Ziggler and use that money and pay like 80% of it to James Storm, right? And there you have it. You don't even need to worry about it. You don't even need to worry about where you're going to find the money. That's how you do it. You know? There you go, Cucks. There you go. That's how you roll. That's how you do it. You got to do long-term booking, I should say, and you need to do it intelligently. And in order to do so, you have to sign some new people. Because let's face it, a lot of wrestlers in WWE have no business being there. You could, like, who in the world wouldn't prefer, for example, the WWE fire like Arya Davari, Tony Nese, Lucha House Party, fucking, let's see, Tozawa I like. I don't want him fired, right? But those 4 guys that I just mentioned, Humberto Carrillo, right? You fire those 5 guys and you sign, I don't know, James Storm. Who wouldn't take that trade? You know, who would rather see Kalisto than James Storm? No one, not one person. So there you have it, Cucks. It speaks for itself. Do the right thing, WWE. Sign the Tennessee Cowboy, James Storm, and all the people that I mentioned, motherfucks. With that being said, I'll see you bitches later.